Mom said lonely people need friends, said the little boy to the CEO on the plane on Christmas Eve. The winter sun had barely risen, yet the sky over Chicago was already a bruised palette of gray and gold, the kind that warned travelers that Christmas Eve storms were coming. Inside the crowded airport terminal, families rushed with gift bags, tired parents herded children, and speakers crackled with last-minute boarding announcements. But none of that noise mattered compared to the tension that hung inside Gate 32B, where a sharply dressed CEO, Ethan Cole, sat in a polished leather chair with a face carved from quiet storms and restrained anger. He looked like a man who had everything: a tailored charcoal suit, a gold watch that caught the light like a star, and the kind of aura that made strangers sit up straighter when they passed him. Yet, behind the confident posture, there was a hollowness in his eyes, a weight that had followed him for years. Christmas meant nothing to him now, not since the accident that took the only person he had ever truly loved. Before you continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small miracles, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts. Ethan's plan had been simple: fly to New York, finalize one last deal, and spend Christmas Eve exactly as he had spent the last 5, alone, drowning in work so he didn't have to feel the emptiness. But fate, dressed in red mittens and carrying a stuffed penguin, had other plans. Across the terminal stood a young mother named Emily Brooks. Her face showed exhaustion only single mothers could understand. Her beige dress was clean but worn, her boots scuffed, and her coat outdated, but she held herself with quiet dignity. Her 3-year-old son, Noah, clung to her leg with wide blue eyes sparkling with curiosity. They were flying to Boston, not for celebration, but because Emily had finally found a hopeful but risky opportunity, a job interview that offered the chance to change their lives. She had spent the last of her savings on the tickets, and she was praying, silently, desperately, for everything to go right. When the announcement for boarding came, Emily guided Noah gently toward the gate, whispering encouragement even while her stomach twisted with nerves. The plane was nearly full, and her assigned seat was several rows back. She apologized repeatedly as she squeezed past sharply dressed businessmen. And it was then, right in the aisle, that little Noah's eyes landed on Ethan. Ethan sat rigidly in his first-class seat, swirling a glass of red wine, mentally reviewing numbers and projections. His entire demeanor warned people to stay far away. He was not a man who invited conversation, especially not with strangers, let alone children. But loneliness recognizes loneliness. Noah stopped, looked up with innocent wonder, and reached out to touch the sleeve of the intimidating CEO. The moment his tiny mitten made contact, Ethan's mind stilled. Emily gasped, mortified, and whispered apologies, trying to pull Noah away. But Noah only blinked up at Ethan and said in a soft, steady voice that somehow felt like truth wrapped in warmth, "Mom said lonely people need friends." For a heartbeat, the entire world seemed to freeze around them. Businessmen paused mid-conversation. Flight attendants held their breath. And Ethan Cole, the man who built an empire from logic, not emotion, felt something crack inside him. Lonely. The word echoed like a ghost inside his chest. Ethan didn't respond at first. Words failed him. He had spent years burying everything that hurt, believing vulnerability was weakness. Yet a child had seen through him in seconds. Emily flushed red with embarrassment and urged Noah forward, but the boy looked back at Ethan with a smile that felt like gentle sunlight breaking through winter clouds. When they finally reached their seats in the middle of the plane, Emily tried to settle Noah, but he kept twisting around to peek between the seats, looking for the man with the sad eyes. Meanwhile, Ethan sat frozen, replaying that one sentence. It haunted him. It softened him. It terrified him. And somewhere deep inside, it awakened a part of him he thought had died. The plane took off into a sky painted with the early hush of snowfall. Passengers busied themselves with phones, magazines, and small talk. But Ethan stared down the aisle toward the little boy who had unknowingly reached into the coldest part of him. Mid-flight turbulence shook the cabin. Noah whimpered, gripping Emily's arm. She held him tightly, whispering soothing words though her own fear showed. Ethan watched, unable to ignore the way the young mother tried to be strong for her child despite her exhaustion. It reminded him of his own mother, how she had fought for him until the very end. When the turbulence worsened, Noah's soft crying became harder to control, and Emily looked apologetic as nearby passengers sighed and shifted irritably. Ethan could see the stress in her eyes, the silent shame of being judged simply because she was struggling. And suddenly, he unbuckled his seatbelt. "Sir," the flight attendant began, but Ethan was already walking down the aisle, not with stern impatience, but with an expression softened by something unfamiliar, empathy. He crouched beside Noah and gently tapped the armrest. The boy's crying eased the moment he recognized him. Noah wiped his eyes, clutching his penguin tighter as Ethan smiled softly and asked, "Mind if I sit with you for a bit?" Emily blinked in shock, taken aback by the transformation of the distant CEO she had seen earlier. People craned their necks, whispering as the powerful stranger slid into the empty seat beside them. Moments later, Noah crawled into Ethan's lap as if he had known him forever. Emily apologized again, but Ethan shook his head, assuring her it was okay. Holding the child felt foreign yet strangely right. He hadn't held a child since before everything changed. As the storm outside calmed, so did the little boy. Noah played with the golden buttons on Ethan's sleeve and proudly introduced his stuffed penguin as Mr. Flippers. Ethan nodded gravely as though meeting a respected business partner. Emily watched them with disbelief mixed with gratitude. She explained, hesitantly, why she was traveling to Boston, her fear about the interview, her struggles as a single mom after Noah's father walked out before he was born. She shared how she worked 2 part-time jobs and still often struggled to pay rent. It wasn't self-pity she spoke with, but simple, exhausted honesty. Ethan listened, really listened. And with every sentence, his heart softened more. He realized something quietly devastating: this young woman fought every day with more courage than he had ever shown. Hours passed like minutes. By the time turbulence was just a memory and passengers quietly drifted into sleep, Ethan found himself telling Emily things he had not spoken aloud in years. About how he lost his fiancée in a car accident on Christmas Eve. How he buried his emotions under work until he forgot what real connection felt like. How he had been living, but not truly alive. Emily didn't interrupt, didn't pity him. She simply listened, and in her steady gaze Ethan found a comfort he had never expected. When the plane finally descended into Boston, snow was falling thick and soft, layering the runway in white. As passengers unbuckled, Ethan felt a strange ache in his chest at the thought of leaving. But fate intervened again. Emily's phone died. Her printed directions to the hotel were crumpled from Noah chewing on them earlier. And her budget hotel was across the city, in a neighborhood not friendly to strangers, let alone a mother traveling alone at night in a snowstorm. Noah was shivering. Emily was overwhelmed. And Ethan knew he couldn't walk away. He offered them a ride. Emily hesitated. She didn't know this man, not truly. But the way Noah reached for him, the way Ethan had been nothing but gentle, it told her everything she needed to know. They left the airport together. Inside the warm, black SUV, Noah fell asleep with his head on Ethan's lap. Something inside Ethan melted completely. He felt protective in a way he had never expected to feel again. When they reached the hotel, Ethan saw the peeling paint, the flickering neon sign, and the darkened side street. It made something inside him burn with quiet anger. Emily deserved better. Noah deserved better. He insisted, gently, that they stay somewhere safer. Emily resisted at first, pride warring with fear, but Ethan reminded her softly that everyone needs help sometimes. And slowly, painfully, she agreed. He checked them into a comfortable, safe hotel, nothing extravagant, simply warm and welcoming. Mom said lonely people need friends. The little boy who changed a CEO's heart. Snowfall had softened Boston into a dreamy white canvas the morning after Christmas, the kind of quiet winter scene that felt like the world itself was catching its breath. Emily woke before sunrise, surprised to find Noah curled between her and the warm indentation where Ethan had been sitting the night before. She still remembered the way he had listened to her, without judgment, without pity, with an attentiveness no one had given her in years. She carried those memories gently, like something too precious to drop. Noah opened his sleepy blue eyes and mumbled a single word that made Emily's breath catch, "Ifan?" It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Her heart squeezed. In just a single day, her son had grown an attachment stronger than she expected. She wondered if Ethan felt anything even remotely similar, or if she was foolish for hoping so. But her question was answered the moment she opened the door. Because there he stood. Not dressed in a suit. Not hiding behind power or posture. But in a simple coat dusted with snow, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate and a paper bag filled with warm pastries. When he saw her, something softened quietly in his eyes. "Good morning," he said, his voice gentle in a way she had never heard from him before. Emily felt warmth bloom in her chest. She stepped aside to let him in, and Noah immediately ran toward Ethan with arms outstretched. Ethan knelt instantly, lifting the child up with surprising ease, and Noah giggled into his shoulder, as though this man had always been part of their mornings. Emily watched them, wondering how something so unexpected had begun to feel so natural. After breakfast, Emily received a call confirming her job onboarding would begin the following week. She nearly burst into tears. Ethan sat beside her, one hand resting lightly but protectively on Noah's back, and he looked genuinely relieved for her, as though her success somehow mattered to him personally. That scared her. And comforted her. More than she wanted to admit. Later, as they walked along the snowy waterfront, Noah holding Ethan's hand and swinging his stuffed penguin with his free one, Emily felt something shift inside her. The icy walls around Ethan's heart seemed to thaw a little more with every step Noah took beside him. Ethan wasn't a man used to being needed. And now Noah needed him in the simplest, purest way possible. It wasn't business. It wasn't obligation. It was connection. Family. Something Ethan hadn't felt in years. At a small Christmas market still open for tourists, Ethan bought Noah a red knitted hat with tiny snowflakes on it, the same pattern as the one he wore earlier, only newer, warmer, sturdier. When he placed it on Noah's head, Emily's eyes stung. Noah looked up at Ethan with a grin so bright it could have melted the snow around them. "Thank you, friend," he said softly. Ethan blinked. Friend. Friend. That single innocent word hit Ethan harder than any business deal, any applause, any recognition he ever received. He swallowed hard, nodding once, too moved to speak. As evening approached, Ethan drove them back to the hotel, though slowly, as if he didn't want the day to end. Neither did Emily. The quiet moments in the car, Noah humming in the back seat, Christmas lights glowing through frosted windows, Ethan glancing at her when he thought she wasn't looking, felt like fragile magic. Emily didn't want to break it. At the entrance of the hotel, Ethan turned off the engine but didn't open his door. He sat there, exhaling a slow breath that fogged the window. After several seconds of silence, he finally spoke. "I haven't felt this, connected to anyone in years," he admitted, his voice thick with vulnerability. "You and Noah, you made yesterday the first Christmas Eve that didn't hurt." Emily's lips parted, her heart pounding from the honesty in his tone. But before she could respond, Noah leaned forward from the back seat, gently tapping Ethan's shoulder. "Don't be lonely," he whispered sleepily. "We your friends." Ethan closed his eyes. That was it. That was the moment he knew, deeply, undeniably, that he couldn't walk away from this little boy or his mother. When Emily carried Noah out of the car, Ethan followed her to the elevator. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't want to. At her door, he hesitated before speaking softly. "If you'll let me. I'd like to see both of you again." Emily looked at him, this powerful CEO who had been a stranger only a day ago, now standing in a hallway with hope so visible in his eyes it made him look human, fragile, real. And she nodded. Not because she felt obligated. Not because of gratitude. But because she wanted to. "Ethan. I'd like that too," she whispered. He smiled, a real smile, and it made him look years younger. He promised to return in the morning. And he did. Again. And again. Day after day for the rest of Emily's first week in Boston, Ethan appeared with breakfast, with warmth, with presence. He helped her move into her temporary apartment. He bought groceries when she was too tired. He played with Noah while she filled out paperwork. He walked with them through snowy parks, teaching Noah how to build a snowman. He showed Emily parts of the city she'd never seen. But most importantly, he listened. He cared. The connection grew slowly, naturally. Not rushed. Not forced. Just two lonely hearts learning how to beat again. Because of a little boy who believed lonely people needed friends. And then, one evening, about a week later, the three of them sat together on Emily's small couch. Noah had fallen asleep against Ethan's side, his tiny hand gripping Ethan's thumb. Emily watched them in the warm glow of the table lamp, realizing that this quiet, ordinary moment, felt more like home than any place she had ever lived. Ethan looked over at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emily. I never expected any of this. But I care about you. And I care about Noah. More than I can explain." She swallowed, her heart trembling. "I care about you too, Ethan." He reached out and gently brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. The touch was soft, reverent, like he was touching something fragile and priceless. The space between them felt electric, full of unspoken feelings. But instead of leaning in for something too soon, Ethan simply pressed his forehead gently against hers. A promise. A beginning. Something real. Something that would grow. That night, Ethan stayed until Noah was tucked into bed. At the door, he paused before leaving. "I'm not going anywhere, Emily," he said quietly. "Not again. Not from you. Not from him." Emily felt tears gather in her eyes. "Good," she whispered. "Because we don't want you to." Ethan smiled softly, holding her gaze for a long moment. And then he walked down the hallway, but this time, Emily didn't watch him leave with fear or sadness. She watched him leave with hope. Because now, they all knew he'd come back. They were no longer three separate lonely hearts. They were becoming a family. Slowly. Beautifully. Naturally. All because a little boy with a stuffed penguin believed that lonely people shouldn't be left alone.